Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Unify your Smartsheet solution and drive participation with WorkApps. My name is Anna and I'm a product marketing manager here at Smartsheet. Joining me for today's webinar, I also have two guests, Rekha Raghu, who's a director of product management here at Smartsheet and led the team that developed WorkApps, as well as a customer joining us, Walker Chance from West Monroe, to talk about his experience using WorkApps so far for a portfolio management process. Our webinar today will have three sections. So we'll take a couple slides as an introduction to WorkApps. Then we'll have Rekha join us for a demo of actually how to build a WorkApp using Work in Smartsheet. And then we'll have Walker join us to talk about his experience with WorkApps for portfolio management. WorkApps is a no-code tool that you can use to easily build apps to streamline, personalize, and collaborate on your Smartsheet solution. Now, what does that actually look like? Your Smartsheet work at this point, it likely includes more than a single sheet. So the work that you're doing may span multiple sheets. You might have reports to provide cross-sheet views of sheet data, as well as dashboards to really visually share critical insights from these underlying sources. You are likely also collaborating with different stakeholders, whether it's collaborators on your own team or across your organization, or even collaborators that are external to your organization, all who need to work on your solution or participate in your program or process in slightly different ways depending on their role. WorkApps solves for that. So WorkApps provides a way to package these items together for easy collaboration, and the app that you create is available in a single place. You can then customize the access to the app by defining roles. And by defining roles, you're also defining who should have access to each component or page within your app. The goal of all of this is to drive active participation in your process by really simplifying the experience and making it easily accessible across mobile and web. WorkApps can be created for any type of work that you're managing in Smartsheet. And internally, we've already done that across our organization. So across the various teams and various programs and processes, there are a lot of WorkApps being created to really help streamline and communicate better about the work that we're doing. Today, we're going to look at one example process to really see WorkApps in action. And I'm going to take a couple slides here to talk through a ticketing process and what that might look like in Smartsheet. And then we'll head into our demo where Rekha is actually going to demonstrate taking this process and building a WorkApp for it. So for a ticketing process or a request management process, you are likely going to start out with a Smartsheet form. And anytime that form is completed, you're going to have a row added to a sheet. So between these two elements, you have a form that can be completed by anyone and a sheet that has defined collaborator access. You likely will also want to provide different views of the data that's in your sheet. So for example, you may have a report of open tickets that the actual submitter of the ticket can look at to make sure they are aware of the status of their ticket and who's assigned to it. And then you have the receiving side. So the technician or team member that is going to actually be reviewing the ticket and completing it. And they're going to need to see all of their assigned tasks, and you can do that really easily by creating a dedicated report for them. On top of this, you're also going to have a dashboard typically, and a dashboard is a great way to really bring together the important pieces and important metrics of your process. So you might have a dashboard that shares high-level program metrics and KPIs with yourself as a program manager or with leadership. And then you might have another dashboard that's a little more actionable that your technicians and employees can look at to understand what they need to accomplish. Lastly, we might have some slides. So if you have a process that you're managing in Smartsheet, you likely have collaborators that you need to train on what that process is. And that might include some slides, might include a video or other ways to communicate important instructions about your process or program. This is where WorkApps comes in. So instead of running all of these different pieces in Smartsheet, a WorkApp really allows you to streamline this whole process by bringing together all of these items into one single app that you can share. And then anyone who visits that app, you're assigning them to a role, and you're defining in WorkApps what that role has access to. Lastly, you're going to make the whole thing familiar. So you can customize branding, colors, and logos to make sure that your work app has a familiar look. So when people open it up, it matches everything else they see at your organization. Now that we have walked through and familiarized ourselves with what WorkApps is and what our goal is when we create a work app, let's introduce Rekha, who, as I mentioned, is here to take this scenario that we've talked about and actually create a work app with these different items. Rekha, welcome to the webinar. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Hi, my name is Rekha Raghu, and I'm the product manager for WorkApps. Today, I will walk you through a quick demo of how to build the ticketing app that Anna just talked about. Let's review the Smartsheet assets that we will use to create this work app. We will be building the ticketing app that contains a set of dashboards, set of reports, and sheet that manages all the tickets that is going to be handled by this particular team. There are several entry points to get into WorkApps. One of them is Browse. Clicking on Browse, you will be landed into the WorkApps gallery, where you can find all the apps that you have built or all the apps that have been shared to you by other builders. Next, let's create an app by clicking on the Create App button. You will now be landed into the WorkApps homepage at workapps.smartsheet.com. And you are presented with two options of being able to create an app, either from blank, where you can bring in your existing Smartsheet assets, or from templates. We provide you with a set of 5 templates to help you get started easily, and you can take that and modify as when you need it. Let's create a blank and bring the ticketing solution assets from Smartsheet into this app. Clicking on the Create an App blank, you're now landed into the app builder experience. First, let's give it a name, call it Ticketing App. Next, let's bring in the Smartsheet content that we just talked about earlier. Click on one of the Add Pages dropdown and select Smartsheet content. We can browse to the actual folder where these assets are. Like I mentioned, we want to bring in the 2 dashboards, the 2 reports, and a sheet. And click Add Pages to bring these pages into the app. You can also search or filter for specific items. You will be able to bring in all Smartsheet assets that you have owner or admin permissions for into the app. We've now added the Smartsheet assets as pages of the app, and they are now here on the global view on the left-hand side for you to manage them as the builder. Let's bring in a Smartsheet form. So let's find the form URL by going into the sheet and selecting the link for the form and adding that into the work app. Let's give it a name and add that. Lastly, let's also add a Google Doc to this app. WorkApps provide builders the ability to upload any web content link in as a page for any solution content that is really residing outside of Smartsheet. This kind of gives you an ability for you to put all your assets together that makes up a solution, whether it is internal to Smartsheet or external to Smartsheet. Let's do that by selecting web content and then copying this Google slide. Let's give it a name, again, call it training, add that. Before we get into the roles, let's take a look at something called page settings. Looking at the sheet, you can actually change the source of the page, or you can also change the default view, how you want it to look like for your end user. And you can also change the default view for a mobile device. And finally, you can also set filters. Each of these page settings are different for different objects that make up the app. For instance, I've now set card view so that my end users, when they see the request intake sheet, they're going to be presented with a card view and they will not be able to change it. Next, let's create the roles to share the app with specific members of the team. For the ticketing app, we will create 2 roles. In the roles tab, you can create 2 roles, the first role being employee role. All the employees of this organization who would be submitting a ticket, and a technician role, the member of the team that is handling all the tickets submitted. We can create roles, assign page permissions for each of the pages in the app. A system-generated default role is automatically created with view permissions to all the pages. You can either leave it out for testing purposes for you, or you can rename it to a specific role. Let's create a new role for the employee. Click on Add Roles button and give it a name called Employee. For now, let's skip adding people. Let's set page permissions in the right order for this employee's role. Employee needs to learn more about the process for submitting their tickets. They need to have access to the training content, a form to submit their ticket, and a place where they can view the status of their tickets. Now let's adjust the permissions for this role. So I'm going to hide the program dashboard, which is really needed for the technician role. Same thing to the technician report and the sheet. I'm going to leave the rest of them as a viewer permissions. I can also reorder the way in which I want the pages to appear for the employee role specifically. For instance, I can decide to move the training slide and the dashboard to be at the beginning so that they get an idea how the app is going to look like for them. Now, let's go back and add the technician role. Clicking on Add Role and giving it a name called Technician. And going to the page permissions, technician need access to the request intake sheet. So let's give them viewer permission. They also need access to the technician report. We probably want to give them editor permission so that they can make changes to the report. They do not need to have access to the submitter status. So we're going to hide that. Nor do they need to see the employee dashboard. So I'm going to hide that one too. They don't need to see the program dashboard. So I'm going to make it a viewer permission. And finally, they do not need to use the form nor the training slide. So in summary, the technician roles is going to have the program dashboard. They're going to have the submitter ticket, which is going to be hidden. They're going to have the technician report, and they're going to see the sheet in a view mode. So they only have edit permissions to the technician ticket and view permission for the actual sheet itself. And the rest of the objects are hidden for them. So I can again move them and reorder them in the order that I would like the end user to see. Now we've created all these roles. Let's move on. WorkApps allows builders to customize the look and feel of their app based on your company branding guidelines. It also allows you as a builder to make it personalized to suit your needs. You can customize the app logo, the app gallery image, the color, and even the browser tab icon using the app theme settings. Next, let's publish the app. Publishing the app before you add people to the app will provide you as a builder a good way to test and verify that the app looks like how you want it to look for your end users. Clicking on Publish, now the app is being published to make and be live. We have not added any users to this particular app. The only people that is going to be able to see the app is really you. By default, you are added to all the roles of the app. As a creator, you can then see how it's going to look like for your end users. Let's go do that. Click View App on Desktop. Now you can view how the published app is going to look like. As a creator of the app, you can switch between the different roles of the app and ensure that the app looks like how you want it to appear for your specific roles. For example, if you remember, for the employee role, we gave access to the employee dashboard, the Google training slide, a form to submit the request, and the read-only view of the submitter status of the ticket so that they can see who is working on the ticket and what is the progress of the ticket. For the technician role, likewise, we've given permission to only these 3 assets, and that's all they see. Going back to the builder, now let's add people. Let's add Travis to the technician role. And then let's notify Travis so that Travis will get an email that an app has been shared to him by me called Ticketing App, and he's been added to the technician role. Clicking Adding and Notify would send him an email, and you do not need to publish the app. The app is already live. Anytime you make any structural changes to the app, for instance, adding a new role or adding a new page or deleting anything or changing the color theme, would require you to republish the app. Let's change the app color and see what happens. Let's come here. Let's pick a different color for the app and hit apply. When you do that, you will notice that the center canvas, there are some changes that are not published and gives you an option for you to republish. Clicking on republish again will send the latest version of the app to your end users. And you can again view the app, live app, and verify that the changes that you made, in this particular case, the color change is now appearing for your end users. The app is also available for your end users on mobile devices immediately when you publish it. You can view all apps in the Smartsheet mobile app in the WorkApps tab. Thank you for following me along in building this ticketing app. I wish you the very best in building apps to solve all your end user needs. Back to you, Anna.
All right, thank you, Rekha. It was great to have you here and take us through that demo and really see WorkApps in action. I appreciate the time and joining us for that demonstration. So now we have learned about WorkApps as well as seen it in action, and next up we have a guest, Walker Chance from West Monroe, who's joining us to share how he has used WorkApps as a consultant and being able to really package the work that he does in Smartsheet into a single simplified app for his customer. Walker, great to have you here today.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into talking about WorkApps, can you give us a quick introduction to your role and the types of consulting projects that you typically take on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a senior consultant with our operations excellence practice at West Monroe. My projects include various things such as PMO and IMO, as well as process automation work. Most recently, I've been working with a large client implementing a portfolio management tool using Smartsheets to do so. The overall objective was to deliver on our strategic priorities. Through this, we needed to understand our step-by-step process, such as intake for new products, projects, various items into our portfolio. We need to be able to prioritize the portfolio, kind of leverage both those pieces to do planning on the portfolio. And then from there, we want to be able to manage those projects.
What does the collaboration side of that look like in the process? Are you working primarily with a single department, or are you having to really customize that collaboration?
Throughout this whole process and throughout our kind of portfolio, we are consistently working with multiple teams and organizations across the business. This includes teams such as a product org and an engineering org, as well as legal and compliance in order to get their inputs and their basically get their feedback on the various items flowing through the portfolio.
So you're working with a lot of different collaborators in a lot of different ways. And as you mentioned, you're working a lot across a lot of different steps in the process. So what did that look like? What kind of challenges did you come across when you started to build this out?
Yeah, so when we were building this out, a lot of our challenges revolved around creating a very straightforward end user experience. When we first started implementing Smartsheets, some of the challenges we faced included just getting people into the system, getting them into the tool. And in order for us to address that, we tried to take a more dashboard-focused approach where we created or web page-like views to really enable our teams to go in and kind of get to the information they need to without having to go through any kind of folders or clicking through sheets or saving and bookmarking certain things. And so as we were developing this out, we ran into a number of kind of just challenges around things like requirements, as well as getting the data in the right place and making sure that people were actually going into these dashboards. So as we were kind of designing this process and bringing our teams along with us and really getting them into our kind of original design of this portfolio management system, we always consistently were fighting an uphill battle of, what are your roles and responsibilities, who should be inside of the system, who shouldn't, what kind of permissions do we provide to our teams, things like that. And as we worked through that, we realized that we can leverage some of the other add-ons that Smartsheet provides, like dynamic view, as well as reports, to really help simplify some of that data entry and data management for our various end users and teams.
And creating this process in Smartsheet, it sounds like about a little bit into building, you got access to WorkApps, and that helped with some of these challenges. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were actually provided access to WorkApps, and this was around the time that we were redesigning our portfolio management tool. One of the key things we saw with WorkApps was the ability to create roles. As we were kind of playing around with it and trying to figure out, and how do we get, how do we define these roles in the best way? It gave us a lot of insight in terms of making sure that the way we organize these roles made sense to the end users and really kind of eliminated the need for more than one role. And we really tried to figure out, how do we customize this experience to be the best experience for our client. So one of the things that was occurring as we were building out the actual kind of Smartsheet side of things is we were also building out a racing matrix to really define the roles and responsibilities of everybody across the organization. When we were able to access WorkApps, we were actually able to then leverage some of the tools that we had previously created, like our racing matrix, to help define things like roles in the WorkApp. One of the things that WorkApps has really let us do is it has allowed us to be very specific in terms of what processes need to be addressed and how they can be addressed. So we were able to create roles, say for our PMO team, where we have a full view of each stage in the intake process, for instance. Through that view, we are able to manage each request as it gets approved from each step. So once it gets the initial good to go, it moved on to the business lead review. Once it got the good to go there, it goes to our business sponsor. And then from there, it gets kind of the overall thumbs up, thumbs down from leadership. And being able to see that all in one place using different reports and dashboards was really efficient for our team. What it also let us do is then create different roles for those process steps. So that business lead review, that had a role, our business sponsor review, that had a role, and then our kind of in-state overall leadership review, that had a role as well. And so when you logged into those roles, or you were shared to those roles inside of WorkApps, you were actually shared to that specific step in the process. So any items that were ready for review or ready for approval, those would show up there and you'd be immediately able to interact with them. It also allowed us to run meetings based on these types of reviews. So instead of having a deck or something created, we were able to walk into like the business sponsor review meeting and throw up our WorkApp and then just go one by one through each of the different items. And I think one of the big benefits that WorkApps has provided our team as well is the cross-org collaboration. And not only that, but leveraging our automations in our sheets to drive people to the WorkApp to complete this kind of task of cross-org collaboration that's always required when you have a large portfolio. So a great example of this is compliance. So a lot of our products need a compliance review, or they might be something that compliance is submitted into the portfolio. And so for us to really make sure that we're getting the right level of review from our compliance team, we are able to send out automations once things are submitted that include just one link to that WorkApp. And it brings them directly to that role. And then in addition to that, we were also able to use our dashboards that includes kind of the steps of the process that they're completing in those roles. So just trying to add more education for the end user and make it a simple experience. And if they have those questions, to kind of have that FAQ or that visual within their role to review.
you also, with your work app, are showing them the information they want to see that's important to them, but also a very personalized view of actions you need from them, and still using Smartsheet automation, but instead of taking them to a sheet or multiple sheets, you're taking them to a work app that, again, has exactly the information that they need to do or updates they need to make in your process.
Exactly.
Do you see a place where you or your company or your clients can use WorkApps in additional ways?
I think we see WorkApps being a valuable tool for various processes, both internal to West Monroe as well as with our clients. For example, our internal ePMO at West Monroe has recently implemented Control Center. So there's a very good use case there that's similar to the use case we went through today. In addition to that, we consistently work on IMO and SMO engagements, which is Integration Management Office, Separation Management Office. And through that, we typically create a kind of Smartsheet template, or we deploy a Smartsheet template that I think would be a really good use case for WorkApps as well. Just creating a more kind of user-friendly front-end experience for our end users. And then another use case that's very simple and straightforward is just typical project management. I think you can absolutely pull something like an action item log or RAID log. You could pull a project plan and a couple dashboards into a work app and really make a very slick looking project management tool very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just the fact that you've listed a few different items kind of cuts to the core of what WorkApps can do, which is anytime you have a process that really is more than an item or two, or if you're collaborating with stakeholders that are not just people on your team working on a project day to day, WorkApps is going to help because it'll let you bring everything together into one place and really make it easier for your end user and make sure that you can provide them with just as much information as they need, so they're not spending a lot of time kind of digging through everything that you might have created that might not be as relevant for them. Well, thank you, Walker. It has been great having you here today talking about your experience with WorkApps, especially in kind of a unique role where you are consulting and really seeing a lot of different processes, programs, products, all being built out that use multiple items and have multiple stakeholders. So thanks for joining our webinar today. It's been great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate spending the time and talking about these WorkApps, and I'm really excited to see what can be built in the future.
Now, before we finish up for today, I do want to take a moment to review some of these important elements that we've talked about related to WorkApps and really streamlining your work using this new capability. So there's 3 things to really remember. WorkApps are here to help you package the work that you're managing in Smartsheet. So that work can be anything, whether you're managing projects or you have a ticketing process. In my case, I run a webinar program and have a WorkApp to communicate all the different elements of that to the rest of my organization. With WorkApps, you can bring everything together into a single place, both Smartsheet items and external content. And you can also tailor experiences. And this is where you can really create a dynamic experience by defining roles and defining who should have access to what. So everyone is coming to the same app, but they are seeing different things depending on what their role is. And then you can also personalize that experience. So adding colors, branding, and a logo to make your work app easily identifiable and match the branding that you have across your organization. To learn more about WorkApps, if you are joining us here live for the webinar today, we have a resources section over to the right of this webinar screen. And anytime you can always visit smartsheet.com/learning to access our Learning Center. If you're looking for additional education, we have a great instructor-led training program, both on demand and Smartsheet certification, all of that available in Smartsheet University. As always, we do also have some upcoming webinars that you can view and register for anytime at smartsheet.com/webinars. If you're newer to Smartsheet or you have a colleague who is, please make sure to join us for Smart Start onboarding, which is offered on a weekly basis. And our webinar topic this month is Forms Best Practices. So if the ticketing process that we talked about today is interesting to you, or Walker's conversation about intaking project or product requests using Smartsheet forms, something you might like to include in your own work, join us for Forms Best Practices. And in this webinar, we'll talk about how to create a form, how to share forms and embed them in a dashboard or work app, and what additional Smartsheet capabilities are going to be helpful when working with a form. So including, of course, automation to keep everyone notified as you're intaking new requests with your Smartsheet form. You can register for either of those webinars at smartsheet.com/webinars. Now, we have come to the end of our webinar session today, and I wanted to thank everyone who was able to join us, as well as thank Reka and Walker who were able to join us and participate in our conversation all about WorkApps today. As always, everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive a recording of this session in a follow-up email, including some additional resources and links to register for these webinars that I just mentioned. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and I hope to see you in our upcoming webinars.